What's up, everybody? Welcome to Mystics MMOs. I'm your host, Mystic Raven. All right. I didn't want to do a video on this because it seems like everybody else and their grandmother is like panicking over COPPA. And I get it. Because especially when they say, we're going to find individual content creators, it throws up to $42,000 per offense. It is like, oh my gosh, we're in trouble. We're going to start deleting accounts. We're going to stop making content. This is terrible. It's going to be the end of YouTube. And I feel more bad for Google than individual content creators. And today I'm going to discuss why, because Google owns YouTube. And they're going to have to make adjustments and provide tools for content creators to market their channels, whether or not they are meant for children or not. And that will adversely affect monetization. And that's another concern within itself, because children content creators are creating content, providing content, and the reason they're able to continue to provide content is based on monetization. And if it doesn't fall in line with COPPA regulations, well, then they'll lose their monetization. If they lose their monetization, some of those channels are in some deep trouble. So there's a lot of concern when it comes to the sketchy parts of this new regulation. Now, I'm going to say, COPPA isn't new, okay? COPPA was implemented during, I believe, the Clinton administration or something like that. I think it's in this article. I might post it after the stream's over. But it's not new. I believe 10 years ago, it actually got in some deep issues because it conflicted with, guess what? Our freedom of speech. And I'm going to tell you guys, I'm not a lawyer, so this is not any legal advice, so disclaimer, but I'm aware that COPPA got their butts burnt in the past because of infringing on freedom of speech rights. And once again, they're going to do it again, and that could cost the FTC, because if some really high-end YouTuber or content creator decides to push this into a Supreme Court, the Supreme Court is going to smack it out and say, yeah, you guys infringed on his constitutional rights. So, you guys are going to completely rehaul this and get it out of our courtrooms. We don't want to see it again, and that's probably going to be the gist of it, more than likely what's going to happen. Because you got idiots, and I'll say that, I'm not saying any slanderous person by name, but you got people who think it's a great idea. That's how we can generate revenue, is by fining, companies and content creators this money infringing on their constitutional rights. Everything is going to be fine. No, it won't. It won't. Because in the end, you can't regulate something that's a constitution. There's no amendment that can take away from your constitutional rights. So that's a fact. So if you have the freedom of speech, and I'll be explaining that in this video, and another couple of things that maybe you can do to protect yourselves. So, that's very important. So I just want to read this one line, right? Off of this website, which is the ACLU, okay? In a series of cases litigated by the ACLU concerning the Child Online Protection Act, COPPA, or now it's an extra P, not to be confused with COPPA, okay? But it's, the courts, including the Supreme Court, which I just mentioned, explained that the age screening measures required adults to identify themselves before accessing protected information may chill speech such that they violate the First Amendment. Let's repeat that. Violate the First Amendment. The Supreme Court also found that the verification measures restrict far more speech than it is necessary to protect kids, which is a separate constitutional issue. Okay? So that is very, very, very important, because if you try to dictate what you can and can't say, well, you just infringed on freedom of speech. That's why musicians can do whatever they want, but here's the kick. They can say whatever they want, but they have to label their music as explicit, right? It has to be labeled as such to protect children and to prevent parents from buying explicit material for their children. Okay? So once again, you cannot impose what can or can't be said, but you can restrict or give warning to the type of material that's presented in each channel or medium. And that's a very important aspect when we're talking about freedom of speech. Because when it comes to the freedom of speech, we can also say in the beginning of Wikipedia even, freedom of speech is a principle that supports the freedom of an individual or a community to articulate their opinions and ideas without fear of retaliation, censorship, or legal sanction. The term freedom of expression is sometimes used synonymously, but includes any act of seeking, receiving, and imparting information or ideas regardless of medium used. Okay? And a medium is in any platform that it could be delivered. That's magazines, that's newspapers, that's radio, that's albums. However it's received is considered a medium. Okay? So if you impose any kind of retaliation of legal threats, you're what? Going against the freedom of speech. Okay? So, yeah, that's kind of a big deal. That's huge. That's like massive, right? I'm not saying that COPPA is this evil idea, right? But to literally subjugate any content creator by their selection of words breaks the freedom of speech. To literally, honestly, to prohibit, right, that exposure to children is one thing. To say, to like basically like an album and say, okay, this is explicit material, you guys should know. I agree with that. I have kids, I have grandkids. You know, I totally agree with that. But to literally sit there and comb through every channel on a witch hunt to find people because they dropped the F-bomb or they decided to use their artistic expression in a medium that portrays their ideas is literally unconstitutional. Okay? It's unconstitutional. And I think any lawyer, any good lawyer will concur with that. So the FTC, you know, once again, you could have every person that votes on this bill and it'd be unanimous, right? But just because it passes doesn't mean it holds in the Supreme Court. Because the Supreme Court has to go against what? The Constitution. Does it infringe on the Constitution? I think it does. But I'm not the only person, because there's a bunch of content creators, and this one's really good. I really like it because her opening statement is amazing. And I'm just going to play a clip.
Hi YouTube, in this video I show you how Federal Trade Commission and COPPA law infringe the freedom of speech. And I also going to...
What was that? Infringes the freedom of speech. It's even in the title. It's everywhere. Does it infringe on the freedom of speech? I don't know. I don't think I'm the only person. And I guarantee you I'm probably not the only person who agrees with that assessment. So if it's breaking federal law, right? If it's going to break federal law, who's going to pay for it in the end? Is it going to be the content creators, really, who's going to be liable for, imposing a bill that nobody agrees with except the lobbyist, and then all of a sudden turns out to be instead of a gain for the FTC, is going to be a big loss because the Supreme Court's going to be like, it infringes on the constitutional rights. What do you want us to do? What can we do that's going to literally say you can't say that? Now, I'm not saying, once again, I'm not saying that the government doesn't have a right to at least warn any audience of any specific material. That's why these things are put in place to protect the youth from such things as explicit material, whether that's swearing, pornography, acts of violence, all these sorts of things. That's why this is imposed. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. What I'm saying is you have to walk precariously, because you can't literally tell people you can't say that. You can't do that. They have a right to say what they want on any medium they choose. But they don't necessarily have the right to make money off of it. And that's where Google and YouTube are going to have to make their decisions on how it's marketed to the target audience. So does COPPA scare me? No, because even though I am a gaming channel, my games are for mature audience. It's labeled as such for 17 plus older. I've specifically said you can also protect yourself as a content creator by literally putting a disclaimer in your information on your channel saying the content in this channel is for mature audiences only. It is not made or subject to target audience under the age of 18. And by doing such, that is basically covering your butt to say, oh, wait a minute, it doesn't matter. They're like, it's a video game. Kids play video games. Yeah, but so do adults. What's your point? This isn't for kids. This is for the adults who are playing this game. How do you distinguish the two? Well, simple. You put it on the channel. You simply tell everybody that's coming to that channel or watching your material that this is not made for, this is made for mature audiences only. So yes, and yes. So yes, is COPPA a bad thing? I think COPPA isn't necessarily the evil. That's the idea behind COPPA isn't evil. How stringent they try to enforce the regulations on content creators becomes the subject of debate. It becomes what is and isn't accessible and who is and isn't held accountable for these violations. So that to me is where there is a very fine line that has to be drawn out and rules have to be established to protect not only the children, right, but the men and women and the people who are creating the content for their audience. And the viewers, think about that. We're also trying to protect the viewers, because if a content creator, a beloved content creator, is forced due to these immeasurable regulations, a lot of viewers are going to lose their favorite content creators in the process. So I really, really, really hope that there is more specification. I hope that YouTube continues, and I think Google's doing an amazing job, to be honest with you, trying to get situated for this unfortunate circumstance. But at the same time, I think the Federal Trade Commission needs to be a little bit more leery on how they impose these regulations. Because if it comes into Supreme Court, it's going to be a circus. It's going to be a nightmare for the legislation, for the attorneys, for the judges, it's going to be a nightmare, because it's just creating a big ball of disaster in the courtroom. So it needs to be handled with care. It needs to be taken serious. It needs to be addressed in a manner in which most people can, come to the same conclusion to say, yes, this is acceptable. Yes, this is unacceptable. Yes, there are tools in place to prevent content creators from posting this material and to protect the welfare of the children. I concur with that. Just realize, as a content creator, to protect your butt by literally putting in your description, if your content is not made for children, you do so. You literally post it in your descriptions. You don't use any tags that would be associated with kids. And if there's a debate or a situation, once again, that's going to be on Google to say, okay, well, hey, these are descriptions used by gamers in general, not pop culture for children, but just generalized descriptions. So like I said, there's a fine line there that people are going to have to walk, and the FTC is going to have to take a look at and say, was this intentionally designed to, market to children inappropriately, to get them to come over here to watch this material that was not made for them originally. And I think that's definitely going to have to be those considerations, a case-by-case study. And I think a lot of content creators just need to breathe, because in the end, let's say you're a person that's subjugated to these unfortunate circumstances that could happen. Once again, you get lawyers and you get all these people. Sometimes I feel like the system's designing itself around that too. Like, oh, they'll have to hire lawyers, and lawyers, will get more money and all this stuff. And it's like, is that another, a reason for imposing these situations? Because in the end, just keep in mind that the government's also held accountable, for any, inappropriate things that would break the Constitution. So, if the government is found guilty of breaking constitution laws and stuff, they are subjugated to, the same laws that the people themselves are. So I just don't think, that's something that needs to be taken serious, and just be like, hey, you know what? We could get the backlash for this by the public. If this walks into the courtroom, the Supreme Court, we could get in some serious trouble. You hear about nightmares of people suing school districts, people suing cities, people suing states. Now what? People suing the FTC? I mean, come on, man. Don't do it. I don't want to hear about, I don't want to read about this in the paper. I don't want to open up my news for the day and be like, there's a class action lawsuit against the Federal Trade Commission based on COPPA. I don't want to read these things, man. I really, really don't. I just don't feel like that's something I like. Why'd you do it? Like, well, you knew it was going to get there, and you still did it. Why? I don't know. But anyways, man, so there it is. My thoughts on the whole COPPA fiasco. Like, once again, do I feel it's necessary to protect our children? Yes. Do I feel that COPPA is generalizing and could be abusing, this situation? It can. I'm not saying they are, but it definitely very well can. And that's something I wouldn't want to ever mess with. I wouldn't want to be one of those people in the Supreme Court having this debate if what was passed and what's within everybody's constitutional rights. I wouldn't want that nightmare on anybody. Not a lawyer, not a judge, not a content creator, not even from the FTC. I want to face that nightmare. So, once again, my freedom of speech, my opinions, that's all it is, my opinions. So once again, thank you guys so much. I'm Mr. Craven. This is Mystics MMOs. As always, have a nice day.